Thank you again for being here with me. This is the last of the series of talks on humanistic astrology. Here, today, we're changing to something slightly different, and it will be very little to do actually with Dane Rudhyar's work, even though I have included some of his commentary on some of those things. But there were other parts of the presentation, like the astrocartography at the end, that Rudhyar didn't really talk about because that's something relatively new in the astrological practice. And he simply didn't live that long to see this coming, or maybe he knew a bit about where things, in what direction they're going with that, but not until the age of computers, where we were able to calculate those world charts with the superimposition of the birth chart over the map of the world and then see where things intersect, that we started exploring this part of astrology. So to me too, this is relatively new. I got a book this week, a very exciting book, very interesting. I will recommend it to you at the end, which taught me most of what I know about astrocartography. I've been looking through my own astrocartography for a while, and it turned out I didn't understand even a fraction of it before I read that book. So I will show you what I'm talking about a little later. But first of all, let's start with the usual repetition of what we are basing our discussion on in the last 5 weeks and today. This is the book, The Practice of Astrology, and the 13 basic steps for acquiring astrological wisdom by Dane Rudhyar, which we have been going through step by step. Today, the very last two steps, 12 and 13, they're quite general. And in them, Rudhyar is talking about more inclusive, wide, maybe mundane, we can say as well, approaches to astrology, and simply commenting on and listing different other types of techniques that astrologers use and people use to integrate their knowledge and maybe have a broader perspective, not just focusing on the birth chart and on the individual circumstances all the time. And so I will go through those different types of charts and with some examples. Here you can find the book for free if you don't know that already. Oncodia, as you probably know, is the whole archival project, and most of the works by Dane Rudhyar that you can read on this website. I have also downloaded them for myself over the years. So it's a little library containing so many articles by him as well that touch on some of those things separately. Maybe you know that he wrote a number of articles for various magazines. A lot of them we will probably never be able to read because they're not published or long out of print. But still, there is a lot of material on this page for free. And we celebrated yesterday. Was it yesterday? No, the day before yesterday, Rudhyar's birthday. Yeah. So he would have been what, 126 this year. This is the joke, but yeah, it's. I always connect the spring equinox with Rudhyar in my mind because I know he's born very, very close to that date. And if you are interested, by the way, in relocation charts, one of the things that we're going to touch on today, he has a very interesting article on Codia about his relocated chart to the United States because he was French and born in Paris, but he spent the majority of his life in the United States and moved there very young. But then on one of the birthdays, I think it was the 50-something birthday, he was comparing how the sun on the solar return is occupying different places in the sky on those couple of different days, and how the birthday comes on one side of the world in Paris on one day, the 22nd, for example, while on the next day we can count it on his new location. And giving out the chart as an example, it's really interesting. So I recommend that. It's actually more relevant to solar returns, but we can very often mix the idea of solar return and relocation, because very often people calculate their yearly return chart based on where they currently live, which is nowadays very often not the same place where we were born. And now I will start with step 12, the significant use of horary techniques. In this chapter, Rudhyar is discussing Horary Astrology. Horary, I'm not even sure if I'm pronouncing this right, but it means of the hour. So here we have something that only, my impression is only some astrologers use, usually more traditional astrologers, using ancient techniques, because this by its nature is a more ancient traditional technique that is being adopted today and being used, but most of its definitions and the books that you can find on the topic are old books, and you can find sometimes some very funny material in those books, as far as I'm concerned. When we get this book, cookbook definition of how to interpret the different parts of a horary chart. But let's start first by defining what are we really talking about here. Uh, and I guess a good way will be to make a contrast and parallel to transits and progressions, of which we spoke last week. And with transits and progressions, nothing really concrete could be said to the client in terms of actual events. I hope we already confirmed this, that it's very difficult to do any sort of prediction or to give a very direct direction on actions that are qualified as positive or negative, as much as then Rudhyar tries to convince us in many of his writings to at least attempt to distance ourselves from this black and white thinking of positive and negative events and aspects, for example, in the chart or positions or whatever, that everything is whatever it needs to be. But you know how we have more at the end of the day suitable or appropriate moments for certain things and not that appropriate moments for certain things. So let's think of it this way as what is more conducive of the energies that we're currently dealing with. But when it's about a natal chart and then the applied to the natal chart progressions and transits, we can be very general. We need to have some sort of guideline already. Something needs to be happening in the life of that person, already going in some direction. For example, a drama around relationships or some sort of issue in work, whatever it is, but we need to know a bit of the particular story in order to then see, looking at the transits and progressions, how this is likely to develop as already established events. We can't really invent anything there. And it will be very misleading if we try to. But when we start talking about horary astrology, this is now the field of particulars in astrology. And it's this completely different technique. I'm not very good in that yet. I'm thinking of maybe understanding better how to read a horary chart in the future and offer it as a service to, or discuss it, explore it in my own life. But it's a rather special technique, very often misunderstood one more time, like everything else. And I find Rudhyar's advice about how to approach this extremely helpful and important if we want to work in a not just an ethical way and a way that's not kind of treating the client as somebody that's just curious and needs this curiosity needs to be satisfied, or giving shortcuts for problems that this is simply on the way to resolve. But it could be a method of meditation as well. It could be a very interesting divination tool, which very much reminds me to using things like tarot cards. I don't know if you would agree with me on this, but in my head, there are so many parallels between using tarot for asking concrete questions, which is what Horary Astrology is also about, and not necessarily getting concrete answers, getting, of course, some sort of symbolical picture on the other side, something that needs to be interpreted and we need to use our imagination, our intuition, our practical knowledge as well, but it's a mixture of different things. So it's not a straightforward yes or no thing. But with both of them, we have a very similar process of, first of all, ourselves, or whoever is doing the reading for us, but mostly the person that's interested in something in particular, to be in a particular state of mind. that is open to not simply receiving some sort of knowledge from the universe, but also being then willing to cooperate with the knowledge and the information that is revealed. So we can take it from there and act in the moment, do our part of the work and our part of the participation in how things are going to develop from there, based on the information that we have received from the chart or from the cards. So we use Horary Astrology when we need to clarify something in particular in a particular moment. And it's very important for this to have a exact timing. In Horary Astrology, we ask a question and we set a chart, we calculate a chart for the moment when the question has been asked. If you are an astrologer and somebody asks you such a question, say via mail or from a distance, and you're not able to look at that immediately and start working with it, at least a note needs to be made about the moment or as close to the moment, and here every minute is important, when this question was asked. And it could deal with many different things in life. In ancient times, people were using this type of technique to, I don't know, to find their lost possessions, for example. If something disappears, they set a chart and expecting that the chart will reveal something that would be a guideline of how to find the lost object. Trivial things like this, but it can be used in a lot more psychological and deep ways as well. When we need clarification about a current situation that maybe we are not in the position to realize and properly understand, properly have neither a feeling nor an opinion about, because something is missing. Maybe an important piece of information is missing. We're not really aware of the whole picture. Or maybe we are too agitated or too confused in that moment. Well, probably it's something extremely important and this is clouding our vision. So we need a bit of guidance or a bit of direction. It is interesting how this technique also in a strange and mysterious way, like other things we spoke about last time, progressions that are really imaginary and not real planets out there, work and they give the result. Since I'm using tarot for my own experimental ways, I always have no explanation how every time the spread I do is totally connected and totally like relevant to the type of question that I have asked or the type of thing that needed to be revealed. And obviously there is some sort of channeling involved in these techniques, something that we from our unconscious mind, already knowing the answer of whatever we are asking about, just need a tool through which to take that answer to the outside and to the uh, you know to the light so that we can really see it and really think about it, because otherwise it is very vague and unclear, confusing. So with Horary Astrology, uh, it needs to be really the exact moment, as I said, of the question being asked, because then in that chart that is being calculated at the moment, we look at the ascendant, its position. The moon is a very big factor because it's one of the most quickly changing things in the chart. And it serves like a really like a hand of a clock that every single minute forward or backwards would probably mean a different thing in terms of our question and answer. The personal planets are bigger factors. But at the end of the day, we need to know that as a basis that the rules of interpretation of that chart are very, very different, based on completely different logic and way of thinking as a whole than a normal birth chart, even though they look the same at the end of the day. And what I've done here is just selected the chart at this moment, the moment when we started our meeting today. It doesn't really matter. It's just for illustration. What if we had a particular question in that moment. And I really won't be able to tell you anything specific here because I have never studied the particulars of Horary Astrology. I have a book by William Lilly, who was one of the most you know, famous authors of this type of astrology from the past, but almost everything you can find about horary dates back from the 17th, 18th century, maybe even further back in time. So you already, if you have been with me in the last 4 weeks, you know that everything Dane Rudhyar is talking about in his humanistic approach to astrology tries to make uh, a little bit of a distinction and distance itself from very literally taking ancient techniques only because they were relevant for the time when they were developed and when they were used a lot more than they are for today. A lot of it could be retained and maybe a little bit polished and updated. And I'm definitely not saying that this is not a valid technique today. But I guess I need to do more research about more modern authors that have applied, taken Lilith's work, for example, and readjusted it to those meanings not being so deterministic as they sound in most of those books that you find for, like it is extremely detrimental to have Saturn in the seventh house, for example, in the uh, horary chart. Well, I'm not quite sure it is extremely detrimental. It will mean something, and it will mean something Saturnian related to the seventh house, but maybe we'll give a different interpretation nowadays. When it comes to how to read a horary chart and how to understand the answers it's giving you, I have a couple of quotations from Rudhyar, and we can discuss from here. He says, Horary astrology is the astrology of particulars. It deals directly with stated particular cases and situations, and the individual person facing these particular setups of experience appears in Horary astrology in a special role. He punches the clock at the entrance of the realm of conscious living. That is, he signifies his willingness to start consciously to work on whatever problem is his at that time. So there needs to be some sort of willingness to, as I said, to participate in the whole situation. And then the chart can really reveal something. So presumably not always. Presumably if we are only trying to see, well, let's see what happens. Think of a question just for the sake of having a question and testing the technique, but it's not really a moment of critical decision making, for example, then it's probably not going to be what we expect. And of course, it all depends on who is reading it. Like with the tarot cards and many other things that require this sort of state of mind, I have noticed that often the person that asks the question is not in the greatest position to do the reading. Maybe they would uh, push it in a direction that they would tarnish it in a way because of their own expectations, their own unconscious already setting, and maybe when you draw your own cards or when you set your own chart and then try to read it, of course the chart will be what it is regardless of who sets it. But then the interpretation needs to be done by somebody that's not biased and that ideally doesn't have a role to play in the situation. That's as indifferent as they could be, but also somebody that has this natural, generous personality, non-judgmental, extreme, not somebody that is totally in support of one ideology or one way of thinking or one way of, let's say, doing astrology or whatever, but being as open-minded as possible, because then that would allow them to be the proper channel for the interpretation. And they will be able to connect with the person and the circumstance that is asking the question. Now, the other quote is, every horary chart cast in answer to a need which is well formulated and real should be considered as an expression of universal intelligence, seeking to re-establish the harmony disrupted by the crisis or the problem which caused the personal need. The person in need could have found a direct answer within himself if his mind had been effectively open to the influx of intelligence, call it intuition if you will, or God's answer to his prayer. But if the individual's mind is too confused, cluttered, or anguished to form itself into a lens, to focus the universal intelligence constantly seeking to re-establish harmony, then an intermediary or a mirror must be found to do the focusing and the objectivizing. We know Rudhyar's language is not always very easy to follow. It's these long sentences, but I think we get it, don't we? That we need the two sides to be in a proper condition in that moment. And I really like this idea of focusing of universal intelligence. We are assuming that some larger order out there, whatever it is, and however we can explain it or not explain it in practical terms, is already registering the facts that something is out of balance, that there is a problem, there is an issue, there is confusion. And it will allow for it naturally to be solved in one way or another. But we just simply need to open our eyes to how, when, and in what, maybe in what sequence we need to do what we need to do. And this intermediary is needed there in order to translate, say, the language of the universe to everyday life happenings and terms. And isn't that what we astrologers are trying to do all the time? To translate the symbolic language into something that makes sense to even a 5-year-old child that has never heard of astrology. So that's important. And we should be able to connect the dots if we are to do, I guess, a good job in this. So now 2 more quotes, and believe it or not, that would be it with the quotes for today. Very few today, not like last time. But I thought a few more comments from Rudhyar about Horary Astrology. Horary Astrology is an art, he says. It needs to be practiced by individuals who have made of themselves, consciously or sometimes unconsciously, channels for the expression of universal intelligence, who have in one way or another, some ways are far safer than others, reached a state of openness to the world and of inner tranquility, or vibrant yet detached sympathy with human beings. Okay, and the other one is in Horary Astrology, the individual faces the universal. The part faces the whole. Horary Astrology works because the whole acts upon the part whenever that part is in vital need. This statement here is revolving around the always repeated idea of holism that Rudhyar introduces in astrology and tries to uh, presuppose always that interconnectedness between a whole of which we are parts, but both the whole and the parts are made of the same substance, maybe in different arrangement, but the fact that they interact in this non-hierarchical way, kind of more intermerging way, every time something changes in the small part, the big is affected, and the other way around. The whole changes how every single bit of it feels or functions. So it seems like if the large universe out there, the state of the solar system at any moment, which is what we are tracking with astrology, have a direct connection through the Horary technique to the most particular small bits that we can bring it to. It's like the microscopic astrology. Yeah, something like this. That we are looking at something extremely concrete. And we usually say that we cannot escape generalizations when we are analyzing a chart or something like this, because everything can mean a variety of different things. But with Horary astrology, we need to learn how to shift the focus the other way around and see what could be like a very practical, direct answer to something. And the houses can help us see in what areas of life that will play out. There were lots of similarities in how you analyze it with the NATO, but still they are different rules. What rules I cannot go into right now because I also don't know that well. That's not my specialty. But at the end, I'm going to recommend a few books so you can go into it more if you're interested. And now we're coming to the 13th last step. At this point, it's almost 1 hour since we started. Would you like a quick break or shall we go on?
I think we can go on, but
Yes, I think we
We
have,
can
I
go
haven't
on.
talked for such a long time, yeah, as we had such a long introduction in the beginning. So let's go on, and maybe after another half an hour, I will stop for 5 minutes just so that you can, yeah, have a bit of a pause. Right. So now something totally different. The establishment of larger frames of reference for individual charts. This is in the opposite direction, from the small to the large. And again, getting out of the territory of natal chart astrology, let's see what else there is for us there to explore. And I know that some people pick one of those things and really specialize in them. And this is all they do as astrologers. Maybe it needs to be a little bit of everything all the time while we have our specialty because they are interconnected. We should be reminded, as Rudhyar says, that we don't live in a vacuum, that we are part of something going around us, be it just our, very close environment, our family, our circle of friends, and wherever we work, whatever. But there is also a bigger picture. We're part of a nation. We live in a particular city, state, and so on. And we're also connected nowadays more and more to the whole world. From a distance, as we are at the moment, we are interacting, and this interaction has its positive and negative, consequences as well. So, the more global the world becomes, the more these other types of astrology will be rediscovered again because actually they also originate a lot uh, back in time, especially mundane astrology, but it was very different. Like with Horary, what it meant at the time when the only important person in a whole nation was the king and nobody else's horoscope was ever calculated. Mundane astrology wasn't what we have made it today. Wasn't applied to things like weather forecasts and events related to the environment. It wasn't applied politically that extensively because nowadays politics and international relations are so much more complex and so different. There are factors there that never existed in the so localized way of life in the past. So the rules have to be changed a little bit. We can't be totally fanatical about following by the word and by the book ancient technique. This is my view of it, and I believe Rudhyar's view of it as well. Whatever his actual writings were about, one thing is clear, that this was somebody that was very open to rethinking concepts and connecting them to the highest forms of thought in the current times and sometimes ahead of the time. Marrying astrology with depth psychology, that at that time that he wrote most of his work, was at the forefront of its initial steps. And many other things, he was widely read and influenced by many other authors, historians including, and was trying to make those connections, not disregarding and trying to kind of reinvent the wheel, but at the same time asking the question, how is this relevant for what we're doing today and for people today with their own particular needs? And I guess even Rogers' astrology will need to be updated after a while. So again, let's try to be open-minded about it and see what we can discover too. What kinds of other charts we can see? For example, family heredity charts that are actually part of those relationship group of charts. And this is very close to natal astrology, actually, as in fact it is in the same category, where you are now taking the chart of one person and of another, or a number of, say, members of the same family. Very interesting it could be when they are coming from different generations in that same family. And certain patterns can be seen in those several consecutive charts that repeat themselves. And it has been seen and realized that certainly we can claim that uh, when you belong to a family, there will be certain things in your chart that will be a direct reflection to not just those of your parents, but maybe of people very far back in time in your own maternal or paternal line that were dealing with something very close to a central issue in your own life. Very often we can see, and this is a major field of psychology that in therapy could have amazing potential, I think, to see where is the root of a problem that has no other explanation in the actual life of somebody that is struggling with that, usually psychological complex or problem. And sometimes the answer can be found in the chart of a distant relative, or not that distant relative, or several of them. And if we are lucky enough to have information about our family past and people that lived, say, more than 100 years back in time and have something retained from their biography, and especially a particular date of birth with time and so on, then very interesting things come out. And we can trace in those charts something that may have been left unresolved or may have been suffered as a very major trauma by that other person. They died, time passed, and then another member of that same family that we happen to be is having to deal with this unfinished business. And they are, I mean, some astrologers obviously claim and demonstrated by the study of many charts, pointing out exactly what they're talking about and what's the problem in this case. That there needs to be one person that breaks the so-called curse and or breaks the pattern, because it doesn't need to be a curse. It could be just a pattern of, for example, overall passivity in an area where more action was needed. And it doesn't need to be something extremely dramatic, but still problematic at the same time. And that needs to be addressed. And sometimes this can give the explanation of very stressful events that appear to be coming from outside, out of nowhere, almost like real curses that the person in no way figures out how they have, deserved it or led themselves to it. Those sorts of events, and they can be traced back to something in the family. This is a very interesting area for me. I have been experimenting with that. Not that much information, unfortunately, for most distant relatives of people. In Western countries, we have more records, but in places like where I come from in Bulgaria, it's more tricky to get to your grandparents' files, for example. But at the same time, there are more stories being told. So if I have a date of birth, we can see how, especially on the two sides of the family, if you analyze your father's side and your mother's side, several generations back in time, you can potentially see what led to you. What was like many charts containing particular signs or particular aspects or houses or whatever it may be. And either it needed to be shifted to something else, and now you're dealing with you're somebody that's quite different from that family. There was too much of the same thing, let's say, or the other way around, that yet another one has been born with a follow-up. Also, you have things like siblings charts, where you can compare and see in a small kind of living together family, or say constrained within the current generations that are living people, the mother, the father, and their children. And the connection is not just between the parents and the children, but also the siblings. And it's not just about seeing how they affect each other, whether they would live with each other more easily or there will be lots of clashes between them. It is not direct synastry all the time. Sometimes it's about realizing that one of the members of that family is standing out in one way or another, while all the other 3 or 5 people are kind of forming a group of very similar charts. It's very interesting to observe those those patterns. I don't know if you have ever played with hereditary astrology. I have an example. I'll go back to this slide after, but here, uh, this is at the same time, maybe we can say, an example of the family charts, but also of synastry and composite, which is the other two names of ways to look at relationship between two or more people. When it's synastry, we are having one chart and another mixed together, literally the planet positions of one person's chart put over the other one. So we are looking at both of them at the same time. But before we do that, let's see what touches what. So for example, if the sun of one person is talking, making aspects, important aspects to, for example, the moon of the other person or any of its planets and points, before we move to the synastry, it is always a good idea to first look at the individual charts. So here I have selected the charts of the grandparents of a friend of mine. So these people were actually spouses, and they are both long dead. I mean, these are charts of last century, but it doesn't matter really. This could be anything. This could be a chart of you and your dog. Could be the other chart. Even though I'm not sure pets charts are being read in the same way as human ones, but why not? Um, it could be an event and the person. So you can see how the event affects the person and arguably how the person affects the event, because I think we can safely say that whoever is participating also changes, if it's a company that is being set, for example, it really matters who are the people that are establishing that company. And now these are two separate charts of a man and of a woman. As you know, there's no way we can know which one is the men's and which one is the woman's. I leave this for you to guess. But this is the total neutrality when it comes to things like gender and so on of astrology. These are symbols. These are not people. So this is the symbol of the very first moments when that person appeared in the world and started interacting with the world. So from now on, we can see a certain pattern of their temperaments, of their presuppositions, their potentials, and so on. But it's all just set out as a advice. And somehow intuitively, or I don't know how exactly, we are following along this line and living up our chart, at least to some extent. So going back to the question of synastry, I don't like the practice of jumping straight into the synastry chart and starting to comment. Now, your Venus is square his Mars, your moon is on his ascendant, so this can lead to that. Well, we have to do this at some point, but I think this needs to be step 2. Step 1, look at each one of those two people. We need to know who they are. We need to know things about them, at least, if we cannot know them in person. We need to know the general circumstances and how they are already living up their chart. With the birth chart, we need to at least narrow down what we believe the general purpose of that life is or should be, even if the guy or the woman is not really aware of that. You know how people live their charts at different levels. So it could be exactly the same chart, but lived at completely different level from that person. Some very basic, some very, say higher, more conscious, more developed way in one way or another. So these are all judgments that we need to make somehow when we work with these people. So not just charts like this. They don't mean much without context. But if we know about them, we can picture in our head what we believe is generally good for this person. Say the first one is the man's chart, the second one is the woman's chart. What's really important for them separately? And then when you combine them with a partner, then you can see not just what the book says about positive and negative aspects between planets and so on, but also, is this person going to be able to live their personal potential? Will that be helped, or will that be obstructed by this partner, or triggered in one way or another? Will they have a shortcut because the partner will maybe embody some of the things in their own chart that they are trying to not embody because it's not that easy for them, and the other way around? So the matter of projection, which things in the personal charts are more subject to projection, so that can happen eventually. And there are cases when sun square sun between partners would be something very hard to deal with, for example, because they will be looking at different directions. They will have totally separate, say, world views and philosophies about life, or maybe they would want to apply their skills in areas that are completely contradictory from one another. But in some cases, that may be exactly what they need. It may be a case where the couple needs to be of two people that follow their own professional, say, ways, and they don't necessarily work together, or they don't share the same interests. But other things in their charts make them connect on another level. Say on an emotional level, they can be really good at home when they are, managing their behind the scenes life. But maybe they won't be able to support one another in their aspirations, in their career development or their interests, anything like that. They probably won't have the same opinions about the big picture. And they would analyze everything and the world and other people separately. And if this is okay with them, this is okay. But the astrologer needs to make it clear for themselves, well, which would be okay for these people. Yeah, which option? And it's the same thing with everything else. So understanding really well in depth the personal birth charts before looking at the synastry changes the game with the synastry interpretation. And here we've got an example of a synastry chart, this one, where we've got basically the chart of the one and the other over one another. They're both in the same wheel. And when we look at it this way, we can see some of the aspects. I always use a grid as well, because this is a bit difficult to, to figure out. There's so many aspects in the middle that it's not always easy to read this. And the most obvious thing with these wheels are the conjunctions and the oppositions. Well, sometimes what is really going on are some squares or semi-squares or quincunxes or things like that, that when you look at the grid, you can really see what's predominant in the aspects. But at least when you first glance at this wheel, you can see several things that stand out. For example, here with these two people, the south node of one is almost exactly on the moon of the other. And this is definitely going to be an important aspect in their synastry. So they have these two things in themselves, separate. So that this is his moon, this is her south node. But then when these two people meet, they activate in each other the relevant point. And this particular person is becoming, the trigger for, say, the woman to pay attention to her south node, or to maybe receive care and understanding and some sort of guidance, I don't know, but some sort of help, as this is the general idea about connections between south node and especially the moon or another planet of the other person, that the south node person is getting help, is getting understanding for where they're coming from, the south node, their conditioning, their so-called karmic history. And then this is on the same wavelength as the current emotional state and way of interpreting the world and adjusting to the world of the other person. These are the nodes of the moon, as we know. So the node of the moon of one on the actual moon of the other. So this is powerful synastry, we can see. And it's just an example. There are other things that are not sounding that good in this case. For example, the suns are, well, no, they're not in a square. Let me see what else. Well, the sun of one is opposite the Pluto of the other. And yeah, they're from the same generation. And this is also important. That's why we needed to look at the personal charts before we looked at this, because bear in mind the ages of those people as well. And here we can see clearly they were almost from the same generation. There was a very slight difference in age because Pluto is in the same place, Neptune is pretty much in the same place. So when the other planets are, coinciding like this, obviously they're born in similar times. But one of them, the middle is the man, by birth has Sun opposite Pluto. So he's born with that aspect. And then it is not unusual that another person from his generation will have their Pluto opposite his Sun. Does it make sense to you? I mean, this is everybody from that generation. Like I have Sun conjunct Pluto in my chart, and pretty much everybody in my generation, their Pluto, so-called, is on my Sun, because obviously that would be the case. But it may have been a bit more special if these people were 10 years apart or 20 years apart in their, ages, and we have this aspect in the synastry. Then we need to take it a bit more seriously, because then there is a direct link between two generations. So one of them, as an individual person, their son, is somehow connecting to the issues of the generation of the other person, which is not their own, it's something else. So that may be something to explore. But with synastry, the two sides remain somehow independent. The two people remain themselves, and then when they meet, there is an alchemical reaction. We have, yes, we have something else being born. This something else is some other kind of chart, but not yet. Still, they are kind of reacting to each other with the synastry. So how is my moon feeling with my partner's, I don't know, Uranus or whatever else? How is his Mars feeling with my Mercury? What is being activated in me? So I use with this person automatically, I start, say, being more talkative, while with another, I shut up because there's something blocking my communication. This is the kind of interrelatedness and how everybody out there you meet in all sorts of different contexts is affecting you with their own energies. And it's the point of exchange, this sort of chart. It can be very helpful to see, whether two people can work together, live together. Well, everybody can, but what would be the feeling about it? That's what this chart is telling us. Whether there will be more stress, agitation, tension, or the other way around. Sometimes very peaceful synastries. I had a couple friends, they are a couple for over 10 years, and they wanted one day to have their synastry done, and the picture was so positive that at the end of the day, in our conversation with them, the three of us, we realized that this so positive picture is actually not that positive. That they have gotten stuck in their life in too much peace, in too much compatibility. Maybe that sounds strange to you, but they said we're not moving, we're not developing, we're not being challenged. We are all the same. We almost haven't changed since 10 years ago when we started living together. And that's not normal, isn't it? So some squares and oppositions in the synastry, even most astrologers say oppositions in the synastry are considered to be very beneficial because they really stir something in us and they make us jump and think about things, and they serve as mirrors, literally. So that's very helpful. And also very contrasting charts in terms of houses. So if you have, here we see a mixture with this synastry chart, everything is pretty much all over the place with the planets. But we can have, in my situation, for example, I have a very descendant chart. Many things are around the descendant. Well, my partner is the other way around. Almost everything in the chart is around the ascendant. So when you have a synastry done, the planets overlap, but the houses are opposite. So whatever I have in my second, he has in his eighth, in the other way around. Yeah. So that could be also a sort of an opposition situation, even though not directly. Most of the planets, in fact, are in conjunction in the charts, but because the houses are in opposition, that creates, like living, in fact, in different worlds, participating in completely different areas of life. Yes, we may think similarly, we may, have very similar, this, same sun signs, moon and sun conjunction, Venus and ascendant conjunction, all those sorts of things are very helpful to be looking in the same direction. But when it comes to how you live your life, what you do, how you, what you take part in everyday, things, very different, extremely different. And when a job needs to be done by two people like this, they usually distribute the roles. They're not doing the same task simultaneously. While in other cases, it's exactly that you come together with someone and you get creative together and you both move a process forward. So, so many different, I can talk until, tomorrow about synastry. It's very interesting, but we just scratched the surface here to mention that this field is out there and it's quite important. But then when we spoke about the chemical reaction, I wasn't very exact because this is actually to do more with the composite. The composite chart, this second one here, is just a normal chart by the looks of it, almost like a person's chart, but it is the midpoints between the points of the two other charts. And so we are mixing the two charts in another way, creating a third. And this third chart is considered to be the chart of the actual relationship. So the character of the bond. And when I say the character, it is mostly to do with the purpose. Why have these two people come together? What is the most important thing they need to contribute as a mix, as a couple? And couple doesn't necessarily mean a man and a woman in a relationship. It could be a parent and a child, siblings, it could be two friends, doesn't really matter. Uh, Two people being related, maybe for a short period of time, coming together just for a project. And then we can see in the composite charts, especially by where the sun is, by house and sign, and where the moon is, what will be the potential contribution to the world by their cooperation and their partnership. Are they here to meet so they create a family? Or maybe they need to be work partners and that's going to be the accent? Or is it to do with teaching each other relationship skills and just being involved in a very, sometimes passionate, sometimes it's more about things like after marriage, all sorts of issues that people go through and they need to, again, focus on this area. Is it about children or is it about what if it's in the first house, the sun, in a composite chart? I don't know what you think about it, but I feel like in cases when the sun is in the first house and other things also support that, it is very likely that these people came together to realize that they don't have to be together and to open the door for each other to realize their own individual potential or to see differences so they can learn from these differences. And as a whole, to use a relationship to know themselves personally, individually, than each other so much. For example, this is a way of looking into it. But again, like with the natal chart, we need to see the whole picture to be able to judge. So this is the what came out, but don't try to read this chart even if for fun because I don't have the birth time of the woman in this relationship. So the composite chart only works when you have exact times of the two partners, as it is a midpoint of everything. Yes, you can have a almost like a semi-composite uh, calculated where you can only see the midpoints by signs, positions of planets in signs. So obviously we can see that the sun of one is in Aries and of the other in Capricorn, and the closest midpoint between these two is somewhere in Pisces. So they end up with a composite sun in Pisces. But when it comes to the houses, and the houses are really what show things in the composite, we need both of the times. So we have the midpoint ascendant, and then from there, everything else calculated. And if this is really what the chart was, that's obviously a very confirmational for relationship and marriage in particular chart, because everything is around the descendant, including the sun. But if it's in the sixth house, it can be in hard work, that relationship. Yes, all right. Enough, I think, for composites and synastry. You get the picture. I'm sure you're not new to this, totally. Now, another field is the so-called mundane astrology, world astrology. Usually here we're dealing with political organizations, trends, nowadays more and more historical cycles and trends, and this is a very uncharted territory yet, and so much can be discovered by going back to history. Last time I recommended to you Rudhyar's book Astrological Timing, one of the most interesting books about very specific events and cycles in history and how they follow the astrological time frame as well, the cycles of the big planets. And we can see so many patterns by delving into this and answering why we are even going through what we're going through at the moment, seeing the parallels in other cases, and realizing that the trends repeat themselves, even though history never repeats itself exactly and directly. But anyway, mundane astrology has been in the past concentrated, and in fact, all astrology was mostly mundane in ancient times, as individuality, every single person's life and their participation in something didn't matter. We were clocked in the wheel of a big machine that only the ruler at the top of the machine was guiding and determining what is going to happen to everybody else and the whole country, for example. So here we're dealing with charts of countries, of organizations, it could be businesses, maybe bigger acts of countries. Say there is a union of different countries set up on a particular day, and we can have a chart for that too. Or kings and rulers in general. And they were the only people whose natal charts were passed in ancient times. And even when that was done, this wasn't with the intention of analyzing the persona or making a psychological portrait of the person or helping them, fix their shadow self, for example. Nothing like that was ever discussed or ever, the point of it. It was all about the ruler as the symbol of the whole country. And whatever happens to them, if, for example, the ancient astrologer was able to discern that it's very likely that in a short time they may suffer a very serious disease or something like this, a health crisis is coming on the horizon, then that would mean potential disaster for the whole country, isn't it? And not just for the person. That could be it's the institution. So here we're dealing with charts of institutions, and they stay the same regardless of who is at the post on that particular moment. The presidential institution, for example, even now when mundane astrology has been moved forward a lot, and so many additional branches of it have been invented, and many astrologers are trying to build their whole practice around and kind of promote themselves around analyzing the charts of famous people or of presidents of different countries, for example. That's all very interesting, curious, but At the end of the day, it's not always remember that the presidential institution is what is the thing, and the actual person, their chart, their natal chart, is only important as far as it mixes with maybe the chart of the country. So if we juxtapose, if we make a synastry between the chart of the, say, the president of the United States and the Sibley chart of the United States, then this is going to give us more information about this presidency than only the chart of the president as a private persona. Yeah, I hope that that makes sense to you. But yeah, these are just two examples of countries charts. The I guess these were going to be relevant to you the most, so that's why I selected them. But there are many books and websites where you can find, even though it's disputable, what is really the chart of a particular country. This is usually set up for the moment of the last important document of inauguration of that entity. So France, for example, has several different charts over time, as it had many republics, as you know, and each republic has its own chart. So each new stage in the so-called life of a country, when it's somehow reinventing itself, starting a new chapter in its history, when a new, say, Declaration of Independence is signed, like here with the Sibley chart. No, the Sibley chart is not really the actual independence, but still, this is the chart for 1776 in the United States. The UK one is from 1801. So that's the Act of Union in the UK when it became the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Before it was separate. So this is not final. In the future, both of these countries may have different charts, and obviously everything would have shifted, like in the culture, in what people live in these countries. Maybe the whole ethnicity would have changed, say, in several centuries. The political direction could be different as well. So I guess a new chart at the time will be more reflective of what are the processes within this country than the last one. So yes, I'm not going to talk about whether this is really the chart of the US. There are other ones that exist out there. This is the most widely accepted one. And that's the one that Dane Rudhyar also kind of supports in his work, having made a lot of research. On Codea.com, this is a bit out of topic, but there is also a lot of material from Rudhyar about the chart of the US, the history of the US, and particular periods, especially around the 60s, where he's talking about lots of things that were going on at the time and how he connects it with their particular national chart. So if you're interested. And he also made the effort to investigate, is it the Sagittarius ascendant really, or is it the opposite? Some people say it's Gemini. And it's quite conclusive that it is Sagittarius with all the rest of the arrangement in there. I mean, I can't not mention, even though I don't want to be specific with these charts, that the US, for example, is coming to its first Pluto return. So here is Pluto in the chart. Look at that, 28th degree of Capricorn. So that literally means that the country was set up in this particular instance approximately 250 years ago, when Pluto was in that position, which it is at now almost. And this is supposed to mean something in the context of the overall historical moment in that country. And yeah, lots of other things are going on in this chart that we can spend ages talking about. We had a discussion some time ago about the Sibley chart. We didn't, again, even there, we didn't go too much into specifics, but we discussed some of the aspects inside, and it was more in the context of the then Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. Maybe here is the moment to mention this, because in ancient mundane astrology, it was the focus of calculations and kind of turning events were all revolving around the cycle of Jupiter and Saturn, the 20-year conjunctions that they make. the bigger cycle of which they are part that we discussed when we talked about this, the conjunction in Aquarius this year. There is a separate discussion, so I won't repeat myself here. And Jupiter and Saturn was the last planet. They were as they are today as well, the social planets, but in political global terms or national terms, this was as far as we could go. So they were the connection that we could make with maybe trends, maybe repeating patterns again, where countries are going through crises. And very often during those conjunctions or oppositions, there was a change of rule, a new king coming to the throne or a new president coming. You probably know about the famous curse of the American presidents related to the consecutive conjunctions in the 20th century between Saturn and Jupiter and so on. Again, this is arguable, but very interesting to explore. And now it's in a new element in air this year for the first time in 200 years. And for the next 200 years, we're going to have Saturn and Jupiter conjunct in air signs, except some exception somewhere along the line, as it always happens. There is at least one exception. And it's an exciting cycle to follow. Now, next, before I go to this, because I imagine we're going to spend the majority of the rest of the time and maybe even the discussion on this, let's make a quick break, only 3-4 minutes, something like that, and we can see each other again. Okay? All right, I'm back actually. So, how is everybody doing? Any questions so far? Anything you want to say? Astrid, do you need to unmute?
Yes, I would like to ask one question, please,
Hmm?
dear. Michaela,
Yes, Michaela.
I'm still learning like about astrocartography. So, but when you put on the chart of Calgary in Canada, I'm thinking to myself, is that an exact natal chart
I'm going to
for
get into this
Calgary
now.
to Calgary, Alberta? Like you know how we have national charts? Do
Mhm.
cities also have natal charts?
Yes, yes, they do. But this is something totally different that I was starting to show you in the next slide. It is going to get clear now what this is about. That's not the actual chart of Calgary. Maybe this is a bit
It's not?
confusing. No, it's not. It's not. It's nothing to do
Okay.
with the actual city, apart from the chart being calculated for that city. But this is actually my relocated chart for Calgary, if that makes sense. But you would see in a minute. Yeah,
Thank you.
we actually haven't started speaking about this yet, so I hope that would get clarified.
Thank you.
I have a question. Do you just use the composite chart, or do you also use the Davison chart?
I know about the Davison chart. I know it's very
Mhm.
interesting, but I don't know much about it. So that's why I don't use
Okay.
it. And I'm one of those that tries to, read about everything, know about everything,
Mm.
but not use everything. because
Okay,
if I
sure.
because if I start doing that, it will be very confusing, even for me. And I feel I need to put a limit into the technique somewhere. But
Yeah.
maybe for experimenting, if there is a case which is very, I can spend more time on, then I would like to look at that option too.
Well, what I find very interesting is that a lot of astrologers just pick one or the other, and then they just work with that. And very, very few use both. And I'm always interested to hear both sides.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I use both.
same here.
The Davison, I find the Davison chart quite informative because it's the midpoint of the place and time when the two people were
Yep.
born.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have a physical reality to that chart, which allows you to
Yep.
progress it, solar arc it, where with the composite chart you can't because
Yep.
it has no physical basis for it. It's the midpoints of the planets in the heavens, and so you can't progress a composite chart.
Yeah.
You can
Well,
progress the Davison chart.
actually, you can, but in another way. You don't literally progress it.
Yeah, but
By the, you know,
what point in time do you use to progress the composite chart from?
so it is working.
Because it's not based on time.
Well, the thing is, there's even planets in constellations that are usually not possible, like a opposition between Mercury and the Sun or something like that.
Yes.
So that's one of the reasons why progressions probably wouldn't really work in that, like not the progressions from that chart at least.
Well, actually, I don't know. This was raised when we had the discussion about progress, about composite charts. There was a separate talk about this. And somebody, I remember somebody asked something about this too at the time. And it's very confusing because people think that you actually progress the chart. Well, as James really said, rightly said, this is impossible because there is no time factor there. What is the progressed composite is actually the progress chart of one person in composite with the progress chart of the other person.
Yeah, makes
And
sense.
I find this very revealing technique as well. I find it really interesting. And in my case, I've applied it and I found a lot of, because I have the chance to observe over many years what goes on and what has been going on in the past. So at some point we calculated several charts back in time,
Yep.
progressed composites, but back in time for our relationship. And there was so many clues about how we developed as a team, you know, as a couple. What was our context and you know, whether we were focusing on work or whether we were focusing on relocation or something else in that particular moment. So even the crisis points, yeah. But you
I made
said,
the same experience, and also when you for example, look at when someone was born, and then you go with your progression backwards to that point when the person was born, and you see what progressions that person has on your planets, and those really work too. It's absolutely crazy, but I use them all the time. I use them for the secondary, for tertiary, for minor progressions, and for solar arc, and there's always so much revealing info in that.
That's right. That's right. Well, yeah, I didn't mention about many other things like solar arc, for example, which again we have had a discussion on, and we went. I remember at the time we went a lot into the technicalities of it and so on. But there are so many here. It's more about even astrocartography is not mentioned by Rudhyar, as I said in the beginning. He's talking about something else on there that is. Obviously, at that time, some people had started making experiments one more time with different geographical areas in the world being associated with signs of the zodiac, also kind of sections of the zodiac or planets. But there was no agreement about this because it was, and it still is, impossible to figure out where is zero Aries in the world map. And different civilizations have adopted this idea to their own personal, you know, very national understanding. So for a long time, there was a system which placed in the middle of the Mediterranean zero Aries. And this was obviously where civilization that was working with the technique at the time was centered at. But this is not supposed to be like a globally applicable thing. So Rudhyar is not really saying what we should conclude out of this, but he points in this Practice of Astrology book in the very last chapter, different other authors that were doing research. And we can go and see what they came up with. And maybe ever since that time, because at the end of the day, it's already been what, more than 30 years since Rudhyar died, and even more since he wrote the book. So I guess more work has been done on this in the meantime. If you know about it, you can share in the chat if you wish. And okay, anything else? Astrid, did you want to say something earlier?
Yes. When you have like a couple, if you have synastry and the south node is exactly conjunct the moon, is that maybe used to be his mother in a previous life, or
I wouldn't be that concrete. No.
No.
I would refrain from being that specific. Because,
Okay.
well, if when you read everything else, and if this in your own imagination, this sounds like a proper explanation of a real thing in the past, because the notes never tell us the real story. They more say what was the emotional memory of something that may not even be connected to one single lifetime, at least if I go along the lines of evolutionary astrology here, the way I understand it. So this South Node situation of one person could be a mixture of many different experiences over the course of, say, many lifetimes that have something in common. And now what we have with the South Node is a remembrance, but not of the events, but of the feeling about the events. That's why it's the
Okay.
node of the moon. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Thank you.
it's, I mean, maybe it could mean that. I really don't know, but I would say try not to be that concrete, because maybe that's not the point, whether it was really the
Thank you.
mother or not. But rather that now there is something which is connecting in a very caretaking way the two people. So definitely we can conclude that if you meet somebody that has their moon on your south node, they would make you feel comfortable, safe, protected, maybe understood as well, and on this emotional level understood. Maybe something in them and the way they live their life and respond to you will sound and feel very familiar because of your own self node. Yeah. And then this
Thank you.
creates the atmosphere for ease and smoothness. But whether that's good or bad, I don't know, because maybe if I have a thing to overcome with my self node, and we all do, don't we? There is always something negative hidden there. So something to be readjusted, balanced, rediscovered, maybe repaired. And if the moon person is just giving us a shelter, very comfortable shelter, and we never face that thing, I'm not sure they're doing us a favor. Yeah.
Actually, I would like to mention when the moon was in early Cancer on the weekend, I
Mhm.
ran into a stranger. I like to sit on the church steps and just see the dogs and children. And this girl came up and I admired her tattoo. Anyway, as we were talking about something, we got into astrology and she told me she was born early Cancer. And I figured out her sun was conjunct my south node in Cancer. And at the time we met, the moon was exactly on that degree. It was just uncanny. And we connected like we had been sisters for many lifetimes. And we
You
were,
probably were.
yeah, but she was very fascinated by my knowledge of certain things. And I said, I know you did that. You went through a hard time, but it's over. Chiron has passed off your square in your sun. But it was just, I just came home and I looked up where the sun was and I was just mesmerized that this is a larger picture than our everyday individuality, for sure. Thank you for listening, everyone. I thought it was a cute story to share, which was
It
the
was really a
truth.
cute story. Thank you, Michaela. Yeah, we constantly resonate with out there, don't we? And do you follow the moon every month in its journey through the signs? And do you register how it's making you feel? Since I have solar fire, I really like that option there for sensitive points. I don't know if you use this. There is a shortcut where you can get for your chart the sensitive points. And I follow like when the moon passes through them, how I feel. And it's really noticeably different in particular signs, but that obviously depends on the chart, on your chart. But I have zones that are very difficult every single month. For the last 3-4 years since I follow it, there hasn't been an exception. And the other way around. So in certain signs, the overall mood is a lot freer and I don't know, somehow more positive for me. But yes, the short term connects with the long term in astrology in a very magical way. Okay, so we look at astrocartography now. How many of you have done this astrocartography exploration? James?
This is my favorite.
Danny, your favorites? Yes. Oh,
Yes.
it's getting one of my favorites too in the last few days since I educated myself a bit about it. And not from Rudhyar. I mean, unfortunately, I wish he could have, written. Maybe for the first time we see in this astrocartography. I'll share the screen again. His dream about an even larger picture and the 3D chart. And I don't know, maybe that's not really the 3D chart that Rudhyar was talking about, but in astrocartography, we have a 3D world globe where things are passing. It's a totally different kind of chart that we can do for ourselves with this. But maybe let me see whether we should start with these charts here or what I wanted to show you. Okay. Well, yes. So first of all, then let's look at. So this is for me because I decided I'll be easiest to show you. In astrocartography, we use the idea about angles. So the angles are the important factors. We don't have, planets in zodiac signs or in houses like we have with the birth chart. Think of this as some sort of another alternative way of constructing another type of birth chart, but this one is global. This one doesn't connect you to one particular place only, but this is something like you all over the world. So how does this work? I'm still not sure I understand it, but I try to tell you how I understood it. You were born in a particular place, and in that particular place, something in that moment is rising, setting, culminating on the MC, and right underneath in the invisible part of the globe on the IC. So we are just picking the 4 angles as very sensitive points in the chart. You know how by transits and progressions, when something crosses an angle or conjuncts or opposes an angle, that's really important, and events can be connected to that. So with this technique here, we are applying the birth chart to the map of the world in this very interesting way where we are registering with those lines in all parts of the globe, all of your planets in the chart, including Chiron, and here also the nodes. So the planets, Chiron, and the nodes, where they are on the descendant, on the ascendant, on the MC, and on the IC. So simultaneously, we have 4 such points or lines, actually, for each one of them. So this may look very confusing, what you think here. We can rotate it and see from different angles. But let's center it here on Europe, because I was born here, here. And what we're seeing here is now on that location, you see these 2 lines running. And if we follow them down, we see that this is the actual ascendant. So I've set it in such a way that it shows me where is the ascendant of that particular place. So obviously, this ascendant line is only one of a kind, and it's showing that this is where we're looking at. This is where the person was born, and somewhere along that line. And also we have this one. At the bottom, you can see it labeled. I know it's small, but I couldn't make it any bigger than that. Descendant moon, it says. So very simply, this means that around that territory, the moon was descending at that moment. And if we look at my birth chart, which is this, we find the moon on the descendant. So this is saying the same thing in two different ways. But then at the same time, when we have the moon on the descendant in my location of birth, in other places of the world, the moon is doing other things. Like we're not interested in all its other positions by house, but only where it's on the IC, where it's on the MC, and where it is on the ascendant. So let's look for that. We're paying attention only at the moon in the moment. And when I turn the wheel and go to the South America and North America region of the world, we find my moon, this blue one here, by the way, exactly on top of Rio de Janeiro. Interesting. This is where the moon is going to be on the MC. So that's really where it was on the MC, on the exact day and time when I was born. I wasn't there, but that's where it was on the MC. And in the same way, we can see it here in the middle of the ocean on the ascendant. That's literally the opposite side of the globe to my place. And if we look, we can find it on the IC as well. I don't remember at the moment, it was somewhere in Asia, somewhere here. Or actually, here, we see the yellow line. So that's the IC one. Well, I think you get the idea. We can do the same with all the planets and the nodes and Chiron. And along this, we can
Actually,
see, yes,
I was going to say, help me to understand why the multiple lines. I don't know. I guess it's not all coming together for me about um why the multiple lines for the same planet or the same thing.
so the
I
lines,
can maybe explain that if you want.
yes, go ahead.
I think it's you can just look at it this way. You were born at some place in the world at some time, and in that time there were places in the world where the sun was rising, and at the same time there were places where the sun was setting at the exact same time. And then there were places where the sun was exactly on top of you, like the place where the sun was really on top, that is usually like highlighted as the zenith. And then there's also places where the sun was exactly below you, which means it was midnight. And all of these places, and this usually goes like a straight line through the globe. That's the MC. And of course, all the other lines they form in their own way, and that's the reason. So there are four angles. The angle is exactly on top of you, exactly below you. One is the ascendant, and one is a descendant.
Exactly. And here is the, do you see
And
this
that's
black line?
for every planet, not just for the sun. Every planet has that.
Absolutely. Very well explained. And this is the one that I think you mentioned, the MC, this is MC, let's say.
Yeah.
On my look, that's why it's passing exactly to the territory of, this is Bulgaria here. And this
Where were you
MC,
born in Bulgaria?
it's a small town, you probably don't know it, around the center of the territory.
Is
Do you
it
know
close to
Bulgaria?
Plovdiv?
No.
No.
Even though it's such a small, it's a small country, but Plovdiv is, I will show you, let me show you Europe only. So we can see this map like this as a globe, but we can also see the same map in that format as, as a map, really. So even I have switched on this daytime and nighttime. So we can see that at the moment of my birth, and usually the astrocartography maps look like this, not that much like a globe, but I wanted to start with the globe because I wanted you to be able to picture, to visualize this idea of having the same planets rising, descending, culminating, and at midnight in different parts of the world and being able to see where that is. The lines are basically showing us those zones where exactly that was the case. Now here we can see the dotted line is where it was night and where it was day. Yeah, so where this is day at the moment of my birth at 6:22 in the evening in Bulgaria. At those zones in the world, it was daytime. In those zones of the world that are kind of with dotted line, with the, marked, with night. Yeah. So this is, I think, a very, very interesting illustration of what was the global situation at your moment of birth. And then we can start making some conclusions out of that. And we're seeing places where different things of ourselves are being activated in a different way. So potentially, if we travel to those places or relocate to those places, we can open up the potential of that energy, that particular planet, but not just the planet on its own, but going back to the birth chart, what this planet is doing in the birth chart as a whole. So the more aspected it is, and say, for example, yeah, as you can see, my moon is angular. It's the only angular thing, but with Venus. But for example, Mars is square Neptune in this chart. And if I'm following in the astrocartography map my Mars lines, and you can see that there is one here running through both Spain and the UK, the two places where I've lived most of my life. So I have a Mars line running there. It is not only something to do with Mars, it's also to do with Neptune, because in the natal chart, Mars and Neptune are connected. So I hope that makes sense to you, that we have to always glance back to the natal chart. I will recommend in a moment a book about this, where all your technical questions about why the lines pass where they pass, what is the logic behind them, you can find it there. But very briefly, you can see that the MC and the IC lines are vertical lines. So here, the actual MC line is passing through directly to Bulgaria. If I was born in the UK, it would have been here, the same line. And from there, as Rolf said, everything is calculated from there. Whereas this is the world MC, my own world, yeah, the way I see the world. And with these sorts of maps, we are almost trying to say that if I move somebody somewhere else, I will have a different view of the world. Yes, or have a different view of the universe. So that is literally the case. That's what later on will lead us to the real location charts. But here, vertical ones are MC and IC because they're following the line of the meridian. And after a certain point on the globe, so you have an MC line running, and then it turns itself into an IC line on the other side of the globe. So where for example, my Neptune MC line is here, the blue one at the top. It goes down, and then if I go to the opposite side, which is going to be roughly here somewhere, then I will find the Neptune IC line running there. So it's literally the same line. And I didn't find here it is. The yellow line here at the bottom where my cursor is right now. So that line is a continuation of the other one. And here, all the IC lines I've marked in yellow on the chart, and all the MC lines are marked in blue. So you can see how on one side of the map, the same planet has an IC line, and on the other side, an MC line. But when we look at ascendant-descendant lines, it's a different thing. They are more curved. You see how everything is curving. And this is because we have a difference between the ecliptic, or the line of the zodiac and the path of the sun around the ear, and the equator of the earth. So there is a tilt of the earth, as you know. So when we are sitting on the globe and when we look at the sky, our horizon is not exactly straight, if that makes sense. So the lines are not straight unless we are born on the equator. So if we're born on the equator horizon line and the ecliptic of the zodiac, where the planets are located, is on the same line. So that's why in birth charts you get almost equal houses naturally around the equator. But the more north a person or south they're born, the more the houses get distorted and you have bigger and smaller houses. And the idea of intersection, so how we have intersected signs and intersected houses. We spoke a bit about this last time. So this is why, in 2 words, the lines of the ascendant and descendant of each planet are curved and not straight. But sometimes they get close to straight. For example, if you have a planet in Aries or Libra, which are the signs close to the eclipses during the year, then sometimes their ascendant descendant lines are relatively perpendicular to the MCIC lines. So this is just like a very basic explanation behind what these lines mean in the first place. But now I want to, yes? Did someone want to ask something?
I think I coughed.
Okay, Raven, no worries, because I
Sorry.
can see you all. I don't see you all at the same time, so I wasn't realizing.
I will make a comment though, since I have the opening. I had this done once, and I was told not to move to Atlanta, Georgia, and I did, and my life went through the ringer. I lost everything I had.
Really?
And I
What
thought
line
that,
is it?
pardon?
What line is it?
It was apparently Mars, and it might have been something else. I can't remember, but it kicked off all my squares and my descendant and everything. And 20 years worth of everything I had went down the tubes.
I had the same experience in California. I was on the Pluto line.
Oh,
3 years, the worst years of my life.
Yeah.
oh God.
Haven't been able to move out either since I came here. Every time I've tried to move, something has stopped it.
That's
Yeah.
also something what usually happens with people who end on their Pluto line. But I mean, the Pluto line also has good points because it forces you to change. That's why you don't like them usually, because you change and you transform, and usually for the better, but that usually takes a lot of effort and it's very painful.
Change or die.
It is true. I lost all my friends. I lost the job. I lost all my money, but I learned a very powerful lesson. So after that, I was for many years on my Sun-Venus line, which was in Chicago, where I had a very good job. I made a lot of money and I was able to retire earlier. So I learned a lesson from California, which was useful for me later.
It sounds like Pluto totally. It always teaches the most valuable lessons, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, it's amazing how much these lines actually work. I wanted to skip through the theory. I mean, hopefully you get the picture relatively well. So we start seeing the psychological implications of this. Because I've been looking in the last couple of days in the charts of my family, friends, and so on, my own. And when I realized how these peaking points, because you can think of each of your planets has a peaking point somewhere in the world, they can be used not just as instruments of finding a pleasant place to, go on holiday or something like that, which is a very basic way of using this. But if you already had ended on one of your lines or several without even knowing it, it's interesting to ask why. Why exactly there? Now, I was here. This gives you a chance to also see a particular continent, because let's make it bigger for all of you to be able to see better what we're doing. So let's say mainland Europe. So this is my case. Every case will have different lines running through. We already saw, this is Bulgaria, the descending moon, which is basically the closest thing on angle. You saw in my chart, there is nothing else on angle. Yeah, no other planets around the other 3 angles. But because the moon is the only one that is somehow getting prominent because of this, when we look at this territory, we can see it marked over the territory. because this particular planet was on this particular angle there. Yeah, so that was important. And then you see that my Venus here is close to the moon by birth. They're just a few degrees apart, and we can arguably say that Venus is also descending, but not that much. So that it's not that exact. So when we look at the map of the world, the descending Venus was exactly on the descendant, not in Bulgaria at that moment, but over these countries, Greece, Yugoslavia, Croatia, and then Hungary, and so on. So that's where my Venus descendant line runs. Yeah, so presumably I can get my Venus activated in the case of relationship Venus, because it could be Venus MC, Venus IC as well. Yeah, but Venus descendant is running along these places. And then if we zoom them up even more and more, and I really like how they do it in astro.com. There is an application for this same thing as well. You don't need to own solar fire, because in astro.com it's actually even a bit more, let me see, it's this. Yeah, so that's the same thing I'm showing you, but there. See, there are more colorful, bigger lines, so easier to
We don't see
orient
them.
yourself. Don't you see them?
No.
This must be to do with my share. Let me see.
Depends if you share the full screen or if you just share a
Yeah.
window.
That's right. That's right. So now let's.
I think they have also local space on Astrocom
Yep,
or
they have that.
AstroSeek.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So this is my same map, but of the world, and then here very easily you can change the continent. So if we go to Europe, it is a bit more clear. Yeah, what's going on? So these are the same, like my descendant line with the moon, and then the Venus one, and then so on along the way. Yeah, and for example, in this European continent, some people may have just one line running. Others may have the majority of their line running. It's very specific, depending on, you know, who you are, what's your chart, and so on. And I wanted to show you this in my particular case, which I thought was interesting as a coincidence. And there you can find all sorts of coincidences if you've traveled a lot, especially. I moved to the UK, to London, when I was 18, and spent about 14 years there. And then I moved here, Valencia, which is this place. And I'm in between the two places still. But turns out they are pretty much the same places as far as
Yeah.
astrocartography is concerned, even
Yeah.
though different countries and so on, because the same lines affect both of them. And the same, especially this Mars descendant line, this is the closest line for both of these places. So I didn't move from London to, say, the north of Spain here or the south of Spain, where there isn't anything going on, but exactly where, and with the Mars descendant, it's actually running exactly through Valencia, which is quite funny. I discovered that recently after I moved here. Even though my first and only astrological consultation that I went to, and didn't do for someone, but I went to, was with a guy in London where I wanted to speak particularly about astrocartography. I didn't know about it. I didn't know how to read my chart. So I wanted his advice. And he was very much like this typical astrologer. You better not go to Mexico because you may get attacked there, or you better, you know, and it didn't make a lot of sense to me. I knew that he identified certain lines as positive and certain other lines as not that positive. But that wasn't a very satisfactory answer of why exactly. I think all of them can be positive and negative. Depends what we want to do, isn't it? And
what is your Mars in your natal chart?
so that's
What
the
aspects?
thing. That's the thing.
Yeah, what's
You
the
know,
aspects?
quite problematic it is. Quite problematic. So I'm going to switch back to this, the chart. This is the only natal personal planet, Mars, which is making a square. You know, I don't have any other squares with personal planets, but Mars. Mars with Neptune. As you can see it here, Mars, Neptune in the table. And Neptune is in fact also exactly conjunct Ceres, and Mars is with the South Node. So I think this gives you roughly the picture. Mars with the South Node, so presumably something not completely resolved along Martian lines from the past and that I need to work on. Initially problematic Mars. At the same time, Mars rules the North Node in Aries. And we can arguably say that Mars rules all the planets in Scorpio by traditional astrology terms. And there are quite a lot of them. So Mars is a big factor in that chart in general, I think. And somehow I needed to be in Martian mode. And once and again, maybe my personal explanation is that this running through both Valencia and London of this line is, I really had to be doing a lot of Martian stuff in both places. And I was constantly pushed towards individualistic actions, asserting myself. I worked a lot with, and still do, with men, for example. I mean, this may sound a bit funny, but I run a construction company. And so I work with builders and with people on building sites where they carry heavy stuff and they do dirty work. You know, it's very Martian. And I need to organize the whole process of, you know, this running of the site thing. So I'm the project manager. I think this is also a very Martian role. And even with my astrology, everything has been very individualized. Like set up on my own, study on my own, having to be very Aryan in a way. Yeah, knowing what I want to do, being proactive. It hasn't been very easy sometimes because I have a South Node in Libra and a very descendant chart that constantly tries to adjust itself to external circumstances. But both of these places have been pushing me, usually through frustrations of many kinds, you know, to build some sort of self-sufficiency in one way or another. Yeah, because the atmosphere or the circumstances, there was always something lacking there. And here also we've got the square with Neptune speaking. Yeah, something in the circumstances deprive you. You know, you are being given a lot because I have been given a lot. I've had very good time, very, you know, lots of luck in many different respects. But at the same time, there has always been something to overcome that was very concrete, very Martian. It wasn't like a Pluto problem. It was typically a Martian problem. So yeah, I think it makes sense. And now I wanted to show you something else. Now we're going to go through those charts. So so we put this even more in context, mixing now with real location. So let me see. So this is today's chart in Valencia. Yeah, here. But this is the same chart in Calgary. So that we can see that we have the same planets, but something else here. Mars is on the MC, while at the same time, Mars is on the ascendant in Calgary. So this is just an illustration of how on opposite sides of the world, we have, you know, the same planet on the ascendant and on the MC. And then if we are to look at the world map at the moment for astrocartography, we're going to see in the chart of Europe, where Spain is, we're going to see the line of Mars MC. And then in Calgary, we're going to see the line of Mars AC. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Can I ask you, may I just ask a quick question?
Sure.
Did you just transfer your time of birth to the Canadian time or the Spanish time, or how did you do that?
I'm sorry, I confused you with all this backwards and forwards with the chart.
I'm sorry.
No, it's my fault. I confused you totally. So these two charts here are both today. So they are basically today's chart.
Oh, right. Yeah, I have it. Yeah.
Yes, because
Perfect.
I meant to show you my relocation ones, which I'll move to next. But
Okay.
these
Yeah,
two are
perfect.
today, so that we can see how the same planet moves to different angles. It doesn't really move, but in the same moment, it's in ascendant in one place, but in MC in another.
Yeah, I have it. Thank you. Thank you. That's cool.
But then And the reason I chose Calgary was just because I checked what's today on the map, in Spain where I am. And then I revolved the globe to look around and see where where is the place around the globe where Mars is actually on the ascendant. And then I found that Calgary was, one of the cities through which this line passes. So now we're going to move to proper relocation charts. These are now relocation charts. And this is my birth chart, the one you saw on the other slide. Again, just the birth chart for the birthplace. And next to it is the relocated chart for Valencia. And just to look at the two in parallel to see what changes. Nothing in signs changes, but everything in houses pretty much. So I've got Taurus 25 ascendant, but in Spain it's 13 Aries. So from fixed angles, Taurus, Scorpio, Leo, Aquarius, when I go to Spain, and it's the same thing in the UK, pretty much, I have cardinal angles, Aries, Libra, Cancer, Capricorn. So that I can tell you, this really has been the case as a proper, like a personal reflection, that the whole adjustment changes. Something like I'm still my birth chart. This doesn't change, but there has been something going on that draws from my personality different reactions, different ways of approaching everything. And I'm being seen by other people in another way. Everything is very much more business-like in London and in Valencia, and in a Capricornian way. While when I go back to Bulgaria, everything is really, say, normal, the way it's in the birth chart. I've given many examples here, but the point of showing you this was not to talk about my chart. It's to show you as an example how things shift geographically along the lines of houses. And the point of the ascendant, so the whole horizon line and MC and IC line are different. And then I end up with 7th house stellium instead of 6th house stellium. I've got Neptune on the MC. That to me is very interesting because now this becomes angular and Mars becomes angular. So you see how I have ended up living in two different cities where my relocated chart has Mars on the descendant and Neptune on the MC. And they are in a square. They still are in a square, like in the birth chart. But now this is also what is called a mundane square. So in the astrocartography map, we can have planets whose lines are crossing each other. And in these crossing points, they make a square in this particular location. And this is not necessarily a square in the birth chart. I hope that makes sense. So they are worldly squares that can be made between our planets. And if we go to these places, they tend to be very difficult places where two lines cross. Yeah? Or there definitely will be a mixture between the influences of those two lines.
But I think the most important thing for you, what changed was Jupiter from 12th house to 1st house.
That's right. Also, another angular we can argue. Yes, Jupiter is also angular, and Jupiter is extremely, you're very, very right here. Not only because it moved to the 1st, but because Jupiter is singleton in the birth chart. So it's a big factor to start with. And then this moves to the, yeah, that's a big deal. You're right. Yeah. I wanted to recommend a book. It's called Where in the World by Erin Sullivan about astrocartography. I don't know if you know this book. So there she explained that this phenomenon that you're talking about of some of the planets straying away from the ecliptic is mostly applicable to Pluto and Venus. So these two, she said, are the ones that have this erratic movement around so that's why the lines, sometimes the lines don't follow the logic that we expect them to follow, if that makes sense. And there is a bit of a, like the line is actually located by declination and by latitude, not exactly where we expect it to be, because we only see in the birth chart where it is in the zodiac sign and where it is in the house. And this doesn't give us any declination, yeah, or latitude. I hope this is very technical. So if you guys want to orient yourself in this, I suggest this book, Where in the World it's called. It's very, very
Cool.
accessible. Because
Okay,
it's
can I ask you?
Yeah.
I don't want to hijack this now, but can I ask you?
Go ahead.
Let's say my daughter is born in February. Let's say at 10 to 10 in the evenings here in Ireland. And she is now living in Australia at the moment. So how would I calculate if I would say Irish time 21:50, because that would on the 2nd of February, because then it would make her birthday then for relocation the 3rd of February at 9:50 in the morning. Is that correct?
The easiest way to do this, so that you don't have any doubt about whether you're making a mistake or not,
Yeah.
use software, use astro.com, go to where you
Okay.
saved,
Yeah.
go to where you saved her chart. And when you find her chart, edit it, like edit the birthplace and change it to wherever she's living now in Australia. So instead of
Yeah.
the city in Ireland, put down this city and it will automatically calculate it for you. And it will give
Okay,
you.
but do I put then for the Australian time, do I put her actually 2nd of February and 10 to 10 nighttime here from Ireland? Do I take her actual birth time and birth date? Yes.
No.
Actually, you put the time of the birth of your daughter when you go before button Astrocom or AstroSeek.
Yeah.
And the software calculate.
Okay, so yeah, okay, cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and for very small towns, you can just point on the map on astroseek.com. You do the astrocartography, the whole globe, and you just point on the map the location for a very small town.
Okay, cool.
And the software is calculating for you the relocation chart.
Yeah, thank you so much. Lovely. Thank you all.
I'd like to add one thing I saw too, is that the person who showed me animated the lines, and it showed the lines going across the towns when they come and when they go, and over year, like progressions almost. It was pretty amazing.
Wow. Yeah.
Yes. Well, Erin Sullivan is talking in the book also about progressing this. So I'm still not 100% sure how to do this, but progressing the lines is also an option. And it's another kind of cartography, astrocartography, which could give us even more. But when we get these basics, we can explore and see, like for example, in this bit here in the Netherlands, where Amsterdam is pretty much, I will tell you something which, I don't know, maybe, I'm not sure how seriously to take this. Maybe it's not a big deal. But I noticed that these three lines are going pretty much around here, and the middle one is right through Amsterdam. I have absolutely no connection with this city or with this country. I've never planned to be there. I don't know many people that from there, anything. But since, for many years, I have been dreaming about the city that in my dream, I knew that was Amsterdam. For some reason, I'm sure it didn't even look like it. But when I discovered this, I thought maybe here we can also trace to something else. Maybe some people can claim that there were some karmic connections, nodal connections, I don't know what, to particular places in the world that we are particularly set with our current birth chart to be corresponding, talking to other places in the world, almost like coexist all over the place at the same moment, where particular sensitive areas are activated for us. So I guess there is a reason why, say I've got exactly this is the sun descendant line. Look at that, the sun line is very important. So that happens to be the sun descendant line. And then I've got the Jupiter ascendant, one of the most, claimed to be positive, and then Mercury descendant line with Pluto descendant line. Another thing I want to point to you is like, look at the birth chart. Pluto conjunct Mercury very closely, right? Less than 1 degree apart. And then when we go back to the map, there are two lines run together, always. Yeah, that whole thing just makes sense, doesn't it now? When you
Yeah, it
compare
does. Yeah.
the two. So now relocation charts are not necessarily connected to this, to the map of the actual astrocartography of the person. This is now we saw the example with Bulgaria, Valencia, that was one of them. The next one is I deliberately relocated my charts, even though the advice is generally to, when you go to an astrologer to speak about astrocartography and going to live in another place, for example, the idea not to be simply curiosity about certain places, but there to be absolutely no way you can go there. So exploring what it would be the case for me in Australia, but there is no viable chance, at least presently, for me to go to Australia. So why ask about this in the first place? Usually, and Darren Sullivan is saying, ask about things that are viable, that really could happen, and see. But anyway, that's not the case here. I'm not planning to go neither to San Francisco nor to Rio de Janeiro. The only reason why I chose these places was for illustration to show you that these are the places where my moon, originally starting as a descendant moon and my birthplace, in Rio de Janeiro, she's going to be on the MC, and in San Francisco on the ascendant. So I just picked those ones, and now I can create a chart. Yeah, knowing that my moon is going to be so strategically placed in these places, I want to see the rest of the story. Now I want to be more specific. What if I really have my eye on Rio de Janeiro and I want to go there? By the way, just a couple of weeks back, a friend of mine here in Valencia, she's from a country in South America, but she went to Amsterdam. Remember my story with Amsterdam? She spent a lot of her years there, and she moved now here in Valencia. We become friends, and she's giving me a present. We meet for coffee, and she gave me a present, a little, I will show it to you actually. So this is my present from the girl that lived in Amsterdam. So I don't know whether these are connected. This is Rio de Janeiro. So I asked her, why are you giving me this? And she said, I don't know. I just went to a store and I thought I should pick this one for you. So
Wow.
yeah, I don't
Yeah,
know.
typical.
Yeah,
Yeah.
synchronicities. Yeah, it's typical,
Yeah.
isn't it? Nothing special.
Can I ask a question, please?
Sure.
Can I ask a question? If you go to astro.com, do you go to relocation chart or local space chart or local space chart / relocation? There are three different things that you can
It's
choose.
very confusing. To be honest with you, it is quite confusing on astro.com. So forever, I have been doing this. I hope you see my screen now. So when I switch to different things, you can see me switching.
Yeah.
You? Good. So suppose we're starting from scratch and we want to see our map. So I just need to move this. And I open a new page on Google and I just type astrocartography on it. This is my way. And then it leads me to this place in astro.com where it actually is. And here, because I've logged into the site and I've already got my chart as the one on the top. It's already giving me here my name. And I have a list of other people, so I can easily switch between them. Yeah, so you know, just randomly person, you go and then I can see their map. And you can see that their map is very different from my one. And I can choose Europe from here and see they have totally different lines running through Europe. So this is something very, very specifically personal, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Does that answer your question? Is that going to be easy enough to do?
It looks like this right now.
Sounds
I
about
did,
right?
yeah.
And also what I like about this website is that if you're a beginner, you can also see the meanings of those lines. So here, if I press on the orange line anywhere on it, here on the side I'm given a description. The sun
Yes.
ascendant line. Yeah.
I live now on the sun descendant line for the past 16 years.
And how is it?
Well, I live here, but I work in Holland, so I'm a flight attendant. And every time when I go to work, I first need to go. I told Rolf about this. I first have to fly back to Amsterdam, and then I stay one night and sleep, and then see my friends and family. I fly, and the moment I land, I commute back. So I'm with two legs in two countries, and so the descendant sun. It is mostly about the relationship here because the rest of my friends and family are in Holland. So I can see the sun. It's all about the sun and the descendant line. I can see that.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes.
If you know something like, for instance, the birth chart of the city, Seattle, for example, is a triple Scorpio city. And if you have moon in Scorpio like I do, and you do, Red, then it seems like you wouldn't want to go there. It would be so much Scorpio. And I did live there 5 years, and it did out Scorpio me.
How did you like it?
Well, I loved the city, but I'll tell you, it was a Scorpio experience. Yeah.
Sounds awesome.
Well, I mean, you're getting too much of it. You're really getting too much. I had to leave.
I don't know if I can ever get too much Scorpio in my particular case.
Same here.
I feel I'm immune to it in a way. Even kind of needing more of it. It's on my descendant, you know. The moon is on the descendant. Maybe if all those planets were not on the descendant, in my case. But imagine if they were around the IC. So if I was born in another part of the world, then maybe I wouldn't want to go to a Scorpio city because that's going to trigger my human world.
Exactly.
But maybe I wanted to if it's an MC chart, I want it to be triggered. Yeah, or a DC chart, like in my case. So it's all very special, depends on the case, isn't it?
I'd like to see, sometime I'd like to see your chart and mine put together, because we've got 8 or 9 planets in Scorpio between us.
Yes, it's very interesting. But you have the sun in Sagittarius, which makes a very big difference.
Yes.
Do it.
Yes.
Hello. I would like to ask a question because I have to move this year, seriously. And I'm living in Toronto, and I'm trying to learn how to do this. Like when you did pull up Calgary, I saw a Sag ascendant. With me, I have my Sag sun conjunct IC, meaning I have traveled nowhere. And I would like to find a city where I can like bring out more energy of my chart. So how would I locate charts of certain cities?
Oh, that's very tricky, Michaela, because they usually there is usually very little agreement what's really the chart of the city, and it is all very experimental. For the large cities, maybe you'll find, but you probably find more than one option. So there are people claiming that, for example, that's the chart of London. But there are others that are saying, no, that's not the chart of London, it's something else. So there isn't, it's even less agreement than with the countries. And maybe your astrocartography, if there are any lines running close to that city. By the way, Erin Sullivan is saying that the lines have their effect, not just to the cities that they pass, obviously, exactly pass through them, but also there is like a range. It's like with the range of aspects, you know, like orb. We're really talking about orbs here with astrocartography. So she's advising, you can, I mean, experiment with that, that on the eastern side of the line, so you have a line running on the east side of the line, about 700 kilometers is the range of influence. And then on the west side of the line, it's about 400. So about almost half. Because the idea is that it's almost like an applying and separating aspect. So on the eastern side, it's applying, so presumably more powerful. While on the other side, it's separating. So you can see if you have a line running close to the city, not exactly through it, which one it is and what you can assume from there, and then make your own horoscope for that, you know, relocated chart, for that place. And look at these two things together. And on the one hand, you've got the lines, so which planets are affected. Then you go back to your personal chart and see what are these planets doing in my chart to start with. Am I comfortable with these planets, or is it the other way around? And then you look at the relocation chart, because then it's telling you what houses you would be concentrated on. You said you had something on IC. Was it Saturn, you said?
No, my sun in Sagittarius.
Sun in Sagittarius.
Like Sagittarius is very happy in the 9th house, very happy above the horizon.
That's right.
And because also I have Mercury in Sagittarius. And I would like to move to a place where it's above the horizon. And I think I'd be far more beneficial to that society than I am in my own city. Like I really have always felt that, because once I did move to the United States for 2.5 years, and I felt my soul actually come out. Maybe because they have a Sag ascendant.
Maybe
I just felt, it was the first time I felt right at home. So it's like, but I'm going to stay in Canada, so I'm trying to find similar energy.
So
yes.
You are having, by birth, the sun on the IC. Is that correct?
Sorry?
Is your birth sun, your natal sun is on the IC. Is that correct?
It is conjunct. Yeah, it is conjunct. The IC is 15 and my sun is 17.
Okay, well, in order to bring the sun over the horizon, you need to move a slightly larger distance, is my feeling, just on the first glance. Because I
was thinking of Calgary, Alberta, like 2 or 3 provinces away from me.
I'm not that familiar, to be honest, with the geography of Canada and how far away things are from one another. But from the looks of it, I feel one continent won't be enough to bring the sun over the horizon. Why I'm saying this? Because right on the IC means that in both directions, now east and west, you have to travel 1/4 of the chart in order to change things considerably in that way. Yeah, but would it not be enough to move it from the 4th house to the 5th house? Think about it. Or to move it from the 4th house to the 3rd house. I think that would do enough for livening it up and for.
Where did you live in? Where did you live in US and felt different?
I'm sorry?
Where did you move to USA and felt different?
Davenport, Iowa.
Okay, check what line goes to there and go all the way up to Canada and see if you find a place on the same line.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. That's a good idea.
That's a great idea.
Good idea. Yes.
I have a question.
Yes.
If you have a planet that squares your nodes, would you consider the place where that line is, I guess, would it be seen as beneficial, or I guess it's hard to say because it's in between both the north and the south node. So I don't know, maybe it's a risk to move to a place where that line is on the planet that squares your nodes. What do you feel about that?
I personally will probably go there because my scorpionic nature is pushing me
Yeah.
to the risky adventure, and I want to have a bit of a shortcut for my notes. You know, I want to get to them quicker. I
Yeah.
don't want to spend a lifetime figuring out what I need to do with them. So if this planet is going to help, maybe it matters which one is the planet, because in my case that's Neptune and Chiron. So I will think twice because I may not survive it at the end of the day. Now this is a joke, but if you have your Venus square the nodes, for example, maybe we can assume what's going to happen. Maybe you would figure out the big imbalance between the nodes and what this is really about with your case through a relationship or through some sort of interaction with other people, Venus. So you go to that place, you go through the interaction and you see what the lesson was all about. But when we're talking about Pluto, Neptune, Chiron, I'm not sure I should deliberately do that. Maybe if life takes me there by some chance, and for example, I have no way to say no, or just the circumstances conspire for me to be invited there or something like this, then I will see, okay, maybe there is a reason, and I need to not obstruct it and go with the flow and see what happens. So
I
the
have
answer is
Mercury squaring my nodes, and on my Mercury line, it's an area where a friend of mine has been trying to get me to move to for years. And also, there's a school there that I've been interested in for years. And so I was just thinking, is there something that's pulling me there? I should go there, but it's also in the 12th house. So, that's a bit of a gamble.
I just wanted to ask if maybe you can find somebody from that place, and
very
how
good.
do you feel about the person of the contact is really fine, or something what you say, no, thank you, bye.
Yes.
Because I have the experience where certain people or people you are working with and from that place the some planet come on your angle, the connection is really good and the working and the friendship is really well.
Very good
That
point, Rudhyar.
sometimes you don't have to move, you have to get in contact with that place, which is also the gift from your friend from Rio de Janeiro,
That's
which
right.
was strange, but it just came to you like from that place, and
Yes.
that's amazing. Yeah.
Yes. No, I mean, you reminded me something I forgot to mention, which is so important. Yeah, Erin Sullivan again, she said in the book, a person is really a sample of the place, and the relationship with someone from the place can give you an idea of what the line, if you have a line there, yeah, 'cause you have to have a line going through somewhere, and then connecting the line with the person, they can trigger something similar, and you can have a taste of it in a way. But also, there are other ways through simply, so in my case, this Rio de Janeiro, it's in Brazil, isn't it? So I can get interested somehow in Brazilian culture, get a taste, go to a Brazilian restaurant or do something related to that and see how this is going to make me feel. I mean,
Yeah.
that you can be participating in a culture without being there physically. So like in
Yeah.
my years when I was a child in school in Bulgaria, I was very intensively studying English and preparing to go. It was meant to be the US at the time, but it was totally being immersed in this world of another country, another culture, for many years without having left my country, even for 2 days. So I think there is a way to experience this, not directly. Yeah, studying a language or being part of I don't know, something that's related to the place.
Yeah, I must say that something happened to me few years ago. I was busy with photography, and one day I received mail from some company from Hamburg, if they could buy some photo which I made, because they would like to put on the cover from the book they were trying to make. And I was surprised. I thought, on the internet you have millions, billions photos, and they just found the photo which I made and they wanted to buy, and they were really so pushing me. I said, okay, now I find out that my son is in Hamburg, just on my midheaven. And now I understand that was just for them. That was their photo, which you can find other. Okay, that was good photo, but it's just amazing how the people find that what was the best for them.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Well,
That's how it works.
sounds
That's the
like,
beauty of it.
yeah, it
yeah,
sounds like it works the other way around as well then. Yeah, so it sounds like those places have a thing for us, not just we for them.
yeah, yeah,
They
but
appreciate your work. That's the good thing on the MC line of the sun. They
yeah,
appreciate what you do, what you create.
yeah, but it's also strange from my first foreign language was German,
Well,
which
you should definitely go there and try to do some business over there. That's definitely not a bad idea.
and I was just everybody around me, German, you have to learn English or other language, German, because you know the relation German, Pole is, yeah, we know everybody. But I was just in love with German language. And that's strange, yeah. And after many years, then yeah, the accident with the photo, and that's how it works, yeah.
You should stop
How it
ignoring the
works.
signs, Rita. You should stop ignoring the signs. And this, as Rolf said, think about it more
Yeah,
critically.
yeah,
Anyway, interesting, isn't it?
yeah.
Story, yeah. Cool.
And this is another way we can be really, now that we can live in well, I'm not sure in the present moment we can travel, but how much we will be able to in the future. But it's a lot different than what it was 50 years ago. So we can look at this map and eventually strategize a little bit about certain things in our life at some moment, not just about relocating and going on holiday, but maybe also, you know, specifically aiming at doing something. If I want to organize a seminar, say astrology seminar, maybe I should look at that map and see where should I do it? Not in this place, but in another for a different
How
result.
about Atlanta, Georgia?
Yeah, if you get me the tickets and if I can travel without any restrictions, I'll be on it
You could,
tomorrow.
you could stay with me for free. I can
Oh,
offer that.
So generous. You're so generous. Well, you can stay with me for free too. If you ever come down to Valencia.
Maybe we should all visit each other.
Yeah,
Come down to Bogota.
will do. Will do. Well, last year on 2020, I was planning to do something in a very picturesque, I mean, in nature place in Bulgaria, close to a river stream. And it's a place where we could have gathered a small group and had this seminar. I even had published it, but 4 days after that, this madness happened. So everything was cancelled. And maybe in the future, we'll see. I may send you an invitation to come over. It's actually very cheap to do that day. So there is a very big return for investment, let's say. Yeah.
Sounds great.
Yeah, we can dream about it, but first check what lines pass for you through the country. Any other questions? Any other comments before we say good? We have a few more minutes.
I have question.
Oh,
I have question. When, because I live, I don't live in Poland. I live in Belgium, and now I struggle with prediction with transit. How do you do that? Are you looking your birth chart, or you look on transit on your relocated chart? What's are your experience?
Do both of them and compare them. This is going to be my advice.
Yeah.
because I don't think there is right or wrong here. I have been in the habit of always looking just at the birth. But now, even with this astrocartography exploration, I figured out that I have been underestimating my relocation charts
Yeah.
all the time. So maybe from now on, I'm going to be looking more at transits and progressions applying to them. But don't ignore the birth chart too. So it's if you move still between places, that's also important.
No,
Like in my case, I'm between places, so it's gonna be a good idea to check both of them, or the three of them. But if I'm pretty much in one place, then concentrate on this. Yeah.
I must say, honestly, I don't feel the transit, for example, to the relocation chart.
Hmm.
I don't see, I don't feel, it doesn't work. When I look at my birth chart, it's okay. Or maybe I don't see something and I'm just, you know, when you are working with your own chart, sometimes you don't see things. That's also
Yeah.
true.
I just want to say to Astrid, we only will be here for 2 more minutes. So if you want, you can stay for just 2 more minutes. Yeah, we're all going to go quickly because you said. But yes, Rita, I think who knows? Maybe some people are more connected to their birthplace. Yeah, and not that connected to this new place. And maybe this is not
Yeah.
going to be your place for a long time or something like that. And that's why. Yes,
May I
Astrid,
just one thought
you do?
for Radilina and Rolf, because you seem to be very knowledgeable in that. Is there also a way that must be also then a very positive and beneficial timing for a particular place? Let's say if you had an affiliation with a particular place and you know it is there and you have been there already a few times, there has to be a way to calculate then the perfect timing for it, for a move. Would you say so?
I would say yes and no. Yes, you can calculate a good timing, but I think the most important thing with astrology is not to micromanage way too much, because the fate is already, like, if you go there with a good energy, it doesn't really matter with the timing. But of course, like, the overall, if there's a strong progression, for example, happening to a natal planet, you're gonna feel it completely differently in another
Yeah,
place,
I get it.
because the progression, like when the houses change the sign and the progression is hitting, like, for example, my Venus is hitting my sun right now, my natal sun, my progressed Venus, and
Wow.
my second house is in Leo, which is the ruler, in my relocated second house. And at the moment, it's really helping me with the money, right? So a lot of people would just look where the in the natal chart, but when you go to another place, that's what I believe, that's what my experience, the progressions and also the transits, especially the slow moving ones, really make the main impact when you look at the chart.
Yeah,
Yeah.
makes sense. Yeah,
Yeah, that was the conclusion
thank you.
last week too. I think, yes, I would say just quickly, maybe with this we're entering into a little bit too much planning in my view, because we can mix all of those things very, very intensely, like try to do timing, then try to everything to be in its right place. But then we're not allowing, I think, the universe to
Yeah.
guide us. I kind of feel like the timing will sort itself out with the relocation, because we usually trigger to move when there is a proper reflection in the transits and progressions for that, or to travel for the same reason. And if you want to maybe do the opposite, investigate it, see what's in the progressions in the transits that's currently pulling you into this place.
Yeah.
And then when you marry this together, then that's getting interesting. Yeah. Anyway, well, I don't want to finish, but I know you guys need to go. And I also need to go. So thank you so much for not just for today, for all the 5
Thank
meetings,
you.
and for the whole last year when I started this group exactly 1 year ago, pretty much on the first week of April 2020. Because around this time I came here in Valencia. It was a ghost town, nobody out there, literally. And I thought, what am I gonna do now? All my meetings cancelled or everything. So yes, I was very lucky to find you, and some of you have been here for since the beginning, pretty much. Dwayne is sticking with me very much. And Dwayne, think of something for the next, not next week, the week after, if you wish to, and everyone else. So I invite you, if you want to make this group a bit more interactive and to have this kind of conversations as like we're having today, I think very naturally, we can continue like that. What's the date? Next week is the 1st of April. We're having James Burgess. The following one is the 8th of April. So I haven't decided on any topic or any direction for then. So I would leave it for some time for you to, if you want to, propose something. Yeah.
Could you tell me again where I can find the footage of the other meetings so I can
Yes, of course.
check
I will
them
show
out?
you all now, and we're going to finish with this.
Perfect.
So we're still seeing my screen, I hope so.
Yep, you can see everything.
This is my page. It's called the6seeds.com. And when you go to events, you have all the next events that are coming up where you register for that, like this one next week. But then if you go to the main page, oh, I'm sorry, you go to video,
Mm.
and here are all the recordings, but they also, this is basically YouTube. So you can find me on YouTube too. Give me a second. That's it. So here they are. And
Ah, cool.
look at, in this playlist, astrology archetypes are all the discussions from the last year. So, for example,
It looks like I'm not gonna sleep tonight.
well,
So this, sorry. So this is under, yeah, because sometimes I look for these things. So this is basically under astropsychology by Radlina.
yeah, you can search me by this
Okay.
name. Yeah, if you haven't
Okay.
subscribed yet, or search me by this name on YouTube, you'll find it. This is the channel. And then if you go to this playlist right at the top, astrology archetypes,
Awesome.
these are all the, just over 50, I think, of them now.
Oh my
And all of them have 2 hours.
Approximately approximately 3 hours, actually.
Wow.
No,
You're intense.
well, only
At
the
least I don't have to pay a big tuition.
That's into an academy, I believe. So I hope you guys appreciate it.
Oh, definitely.
Definitely,
And,
Radlina.
not everything is from me. I mean, these last 5 were my kind of desire to do Rudhyar kind of concentrated things. But before that, it was very interactive. And even though in most of them I make a quick presentation in the beginning, there were other people making presentations. Like Dwayne, for example, has his own folder here. So if you go down my page, there is only a playlist for the presentations that Dwayne has done as part of those big meetings. Yeah. So this is just easier to get to them.
Cool.
Visit his. Yeah.
Great.
And you can also find,
Great.
I have published a few of my webinars, like different webinars, like official ones that I've done. You can now watch them here as well, these last few. And yeah, browse through.
Cool.
Take a look, whatever interests you.
This is wonderful.
Cool.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah, because we thought you all know about this, but obviously I should have mentioned it earlier. It's called,
Cool.
as every time I send you an email after the meeting, and there are all the links there, but hopefully, yeah, now it will be easier to find.
Thank you.
Cool.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And
Thank you.
appreciate your support.
Thank you.
Everything, and
Thank
I'll see you
you.
next week.
Thank you.
Thank you, Radalina.
Thank you.
Until then, bye bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.